She looked damn good in the jumpsuit.
She like brought a bit of kind of English class to the picture. I mean, that was one of the things I was very pleased about with the picture, was that Paramount allowed me to cast, you know, a cast that was drawn from around the world. You know, there wasn't an insistence that everyone had to do an American accent. They were fine that Sam Neill's character came from New Zealand, that Fishburne came from America, that Jolie came from England, and everyone could have their little flags on their arm. I mean, and that, I think, gave the movie a flavour that it wouldn't have had otherwise.
Richard Jones, again, extremely handsome, compelling person to watch. You know, he'd not done much outside of America, so I think it was a real adventure for him to come to England. And, you know, the trouble with you have these ensemble casts is they all get their moments, but at the end of the day, it's Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill, and it's difficult when you're, you know, to make yourselves presence, to hold your own. But I think Richard really managed it very well, even though his part wasn't as big as perhaps we would have liked it. He did the same with Sean Pertwee, you know, or Jason Isaacs. They each had their individual characteristics.
Richard T. Jones was a lot of fun to work with. I think this was the first time he'd really been outside of America and like done a big studio movie, and he was just so overexcited every single day on set. I actually ran into his wife about 6 months ago at an airport, and she came up to me screaming. She said, "You know, Richard and I talk about that movie. It's his favourite movie ever." And they just got married at the time, and they got to come and live in London for 6 months. I mean, he was a cool guy to work with. He didn't like being in the wire rigs. That's my memory of Richard, though. Fishburne was fine about it, but Richard just didn't like hanging around in those wire rigs.
Richard T. was he was just this larger-than-life person who came over to London to just suck us all dry of life. He had such a good time when he was here. I can't remember a time when he wasn't laughing. And then he improvised, it seemed to me, all of his lines. He was constantly saying things you think, where the hell did he get? And just because he was so ebullient, in fact, that's what he ends up being in the film. I don't think that was on the page like that. And he was embarrassingly good looking as well. There was something rather, you know, he was just a statuesque, beautiful man. I couldn't bear to look at him.
Jack, he was like the mascot of the film, you know, this sweet guy, but great actor. You know, he'd just come off, I think, Breakdown, and again, he'd done a lot of drama, but not a movie like this, but he completely embraced it. He was really like the kind of darling of the cast.
Jack was a lot of fun to work with. He really, he was a good sport, you know, because we did some terrible things to him. You know, we hung him upside down, we stuck blood tubes, you know, around his eyes. He had so much screaming and shouting to do. You know, for all the fact that he's, you know, a bit of an icon in horror films because of his performance in Event Horizon, the guy has the most amazing singing voice, and actually started out like in musical theatre. So I remember I had my birthday during the shoot, and he sung this song at my birthday. It was just fantastic. He has an amazing voice. Someone should make a musical with him. Event Horizon, the musical.
Mr. Isaacs, who has done virtually every film we've made, you know, scary. He just became a very scary doctor on this ship. And some of the stuff that we had to cut was his stuff. I mean, we built this huge prosthetic of him, and he's skinned alive, and he's hanging from the ceiling in the medical center of the ship, and he's basically dead, but he lifts his head up and he speaks. And Jason just loved all this gory stuff. I mean, he really embraced it and had a great time. And I love the scene where he where they got the recording and they're trying to work out what it is, and of course Jason says, "Oh, it's in Latin."
Sounds like liberate me something. I don't know, I can't make out the rest. Liberate me. Save me.
Which is a little bit of an on-the-nose beat, but he does it so well, you know, we get away with it. He's great. We love him.
I know Paul and Jeremy from a long time ago, the director and producer, and Jeremy Bolt and I were at university together, and when I was doing a play, I was doing Angels in America at the National Theatre, and he came to me and said, "I want you to meet a friend of mine who's directing a film. You haven't got any time to be in it, so all we can do is get you half a day, like 3 or 4 lines." And I said, "Well, I don't want to be snobby, but I think I should be, playing bigger parts than that. He said, he's a really great guy, you'll like him. And it was shopping, and the director was Paul. And we hit it off, and next time he made a movie, he came to me and asked me to be in it.
Jason and I became good friends on this movie, and we've pretty much worked together ever since. He's appeared in nearly all of my movies in one form or another, sometimes as like an uncredited cameo. Very serious. I had to persuade him to do the movie. He didn't immediately jump at the idea. I thought he brought an awful lot to his character. There wasn't an awful lot on the page, and he definitely brought a lot. A lot of the character traits and quirks are all Jason's invention.
When I first read the script, I think I had the same reaction that most people have when they read horror film scripts, which is, I don't really get it. And it was only Paul explaining his vision to me that made it come to life, because you don't jump when you read something on a page, and you don't get a feeling of dread, and all those things come from storytelling. And more than most genres, I think, a horror film, science fiction horror film like this, is in the director's hands. So I read it and thought, I wonder what the hell this is going to be like.
The ship, do you understand? It's just a big hunk of metal. There's nothing odd going on.
DJ?
Well, I was playing a doctor, and my brother's doctor, and he's this very, professionally, he's this very grim man, very taciturn, and people are always leaning forward to hear what the hell he's talking about. And so, because DJ didn't say very much, I thought I'd be this incredibly serious, or a grave personality, and that worked, because then Lawrence started flipping off me and making jokes about, he kind of made fun of me as soon as I introduced myself, and did it other times, but it made me also, I felt like I was maybe the rock that people came to confess. So basically I played my brother. The other thing I wanted to do was have gadgets. Since I was in a science fiction film, and maybe I wouldn't be in another one, I wanted to have things about me, and I always fancied when I was a kid having a bat utility belt. And so I asked Paul if I could have a utility waistcoat, and I got this coat with billions of strange looking implements in them. God only knows what they were meant to do, and I tried to use them in various scenes, but mostly they look rather cool, I hope. I thought so anyway.
If you watch the movie, he's got so many props, knives and belts and things and because he really got into that. And then about halfway through the movie, when he's realizing it's one thing to get all these props, but then you have to deal with them all the way through the film, he's like, Paul, why did you allow me to have all these fucking props? I've got all these things, syringes, and so that became the bane of his life, is how to deal with all of this stuff.
Paul's an incredibly collaborative guy, and he threw it open to all of us. I mean, it became much more like doing a play, really, because we went to the same set every day for a very long time, which you don't normally do on movies, because there were no locations, there were no extras ever in space. Nobody wanders by the window outside. We became a very tight ensemble company, and we all made contributions all the time. Mostly we made contributions to our own characters, but sometimes you make suggestions for other people, and Paul was always up for it. For instance, one of the things that we all did was come up with a kind of background and history for our characters, so they seemed like they had a full life. And I was very aware that in the story, a number of the characters have, not flashbacks, have kind of nightmare visions of whatever this ship that's been to hell does to them, and I wasn't going to get one. So I wondered, maybe they happened, but they didn't happen on screen. And for me, DJ had a vision of getting his chest ripped open because he had an operation when he was a kid. And so I gave myself a huge scar from neck to navel, and we put it on every morning. It took forever, and I don't think the audience ever got it or saw it, but I was rubbing it often in the scenes. And sure enough, when he meets his fate, DJ, he gets split open.
Sean Pertwee had the most amazing haircut done for this movie. He had his hair bleached, cut about that short, and then just bleached bottle blonde, and it was like shocking platinum blonde. It's fantastic. He looked so over the top, and he came in and he said, "What do you think of the hair for the movie, Paul?" And I just looked at him, I was shocked, and he went, "Okay, I understand." And then when he came back like half a day later, he'd had it all shaved off, and that's where his look came from. And for me, I think it's his finest performance that I've seen him deliver. I mean, he was really damn good in the movie.
Sean, who did shopping with us, he's a real lad, he's a real friend. He was like the sexy, young, fun guy. He brought in some humour. He had a great time. I mean, Sean, who loves movies like this and loves video games and loves gadgets, he was just constantly playing on the set. It He was great.
Sean Pertwee and I go back to when we were teenagers, and it was just so lovely to work with him again. I've done it 3 times now, all in Paul Anderson's films. The first one was in Shopping, where I went and did just a few hours on the set really to meet Paul, but it was with Sean, who I'd known since he was at the Bristol Old Vic and I was at university there. And I remember getting there and going, well, what should we do about this? And he lifted up the script, threw it away. He said, no, 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 it's Paul, it's all right, we can do whatever we like. And we basically improvised the whole scene. And he hasn't changed since we were 18, actually, 19, not at all. I guess we probably look older, but I look at him, he doesn't look any older to me. So it was really lovely to be people you hang around with, to go to work with them as well, makes it a bonus, because you don't have to start getting, funny about your territory.
The shoot took around about 80 odd days. I think 86 days. And we shot over Christmas. We were shooting all the really strange stuff involving maggots and all the visions of hell, these orgiastic visions of hell. That was all done second unit, but Paul directed it and oversaw it as well on the weekends. So if you added in that, probably you would be nearer 90 days. But the main unit was about 80 to 86 days.
I think emotionally, some of the scenes that were more challenging was a lot of the kind of hell stuff. It was kind of disturbing for the actors, I know. And these are fragments in the movie. I mean, really, they're only shots that are in the film for frames, but I think they're very memorable. And we went into great detail to shoot them. I mean, I always pictured those scenes from hell as having a very painterly quality, that they should be like Bosch, or they should be like Bruegel, or they should have the painterly feeling of photographs, like Wittgen's photographs. And that meant we just took a long time to shoot them, and we kind of set them up like they were kind of mini photo shoots. It was kind of disturbing places for the actors to go. We kind of made working on the set feel a bit, it was difficult. It made it quite high pressure because they just didn't come to work feeling particularly good about the day's work ahead of them. I mean, everyone got on, but when you come to make a light romantic comedy and you've got a fun scene ahead of you, that's one thing. When you've come to film a vision from hell, and you're going to have guts spilling out of your mouth, and you're going to have blood pouring down your face, and this is an image of you that's going to be out there, for the rest of your career, the actors found it disturbing. That didn't stop us making them do it, of course.
All the zero gravity stuff was really tough. We made a decision in the first week of filming, because in the original script they were in zero gravity for virtually the whole time on the ship. And Paul and I realized this was never going to work. We'd never finish the schedule. It would just look silly, be too much of a good thing. So we introduced magnetic boots. They're always very handy, magnetic boots. So they go down the corridor, and there's a great shot. We go, doom, doom.
Magnetic boots on.
So simple. And that basically, kept us on budget and on schedule, and I think it works perfectly well. So zero gravity sequences were very tough.
They were so slow to shoot. The wire work was very complicated. It was very uncomfortable for the actors. And it required a huge amount of planning. What we would do is we built large models of the set, and then had little miniature spacemen. And then with a lipstick camera, we would shoot the miniature spacemen in the miniature model and try and get the angles that we wanted. And then we would cut a sequence with that Videomatic before we even tried to shoot a frame of film. And the reason for that is it's so slow when you're shooting wire work that you just can't make it up on the day. You have to be very precise about which angles you want. And also you just can't have the actors in the wires for too long. The scene where Fish saves Jack Noseworthy and pushes him back into the airlock, for example, the way we achieved that was when he pushes him back into the airlock, we actually built the airlock upright. So what should have been the door, which would have been at the side of the set, was actually pointing towards the ceiling. So to get them flying in, we were actually dropping fish from the roof, so he's hanging by his ankles. And of course that's an incredibly, it's a really unpleasant position to be in. All the blood rushes to your head. And then it would take obviously forever to get fish into the suit. So by the time we got him in the suit, he'd already been hanging upside down for a couple of minutes. You can't have someone turned upside down for too long. So you'd have to, once you got everyone in position, you'd have to go very quickly for a take, and then it would take a long time to reset it. So the wire work was probably the biggest challenge technically.
One of the, well, we set fire to a stage at Pinewood. We burnt down, I think it was stage 7. When you first go onto the event horizon, there's a long corridor, and it's we put a mirror. We got this mirror over from France that gave the impression the corridor went on and on like into infinity. And we had a special effects shoots going on one day, and we had this. There's a big explosion at the end of the movie. Fishburne is running down the corridor. The ship's breaking up. We wanted to actually have some real flame elements, so we had a special effects shoot, and the special effects guy also had a wind machine, and the flames went onto the silk cloth that was wrapped into the set, and the whole thing just went up literally in about a minute. The whole stage and that was an interesting day to explain to Pinewood. But I think that was really the only bad thing that happened. The set in which there is the giant orb spinning, that was a huge set to build. That took about 4 months. We had masses of scaffolding. I think, the thing about Paul, most of Paul's films, everything's big. So, it may look like a small idea on the page, but it just goes big. And the challenge as his producer is to try to give him the bigness, but keep it on budget. That was a real challenge on that film. It was very complicated.
Yeah, I did do some stunts. I did. Sam threw me about a lot at some point. Well, when he kills me, I suppose. People who are watching this have probably already seen the story. Yeah, Sam threw me about, and I was flying all over the place. I'm always keen to show what a good egg I am, and get involved. But I remember coming home and barely being able to move, me covered in bruises, little cuts, and everything. But the thing that was most, disturbing about doing the film was the body they made. They made a complete body cast of me that they hung up and gutted and ripped all my entrails out. And it was an absolutely perfect facsimile of me. And a lot of people think that was me hung up on hooks. I don't know how they think I did my rib cage being open, but I remember asking for the body at the end, saying, "Can I have that?" Yeah. It was perfect. I mean, I looked at it and thought it was me. And they said, "No, we need it. We might get to use it again." I went, "Where is anyone going to use a life-size model of me with my entrails pouring out?" But if anyone spots it anyway, send me a postcard, I'll buy it off them.
Bob Keane did a lot of the prosthetics. He specifically did prosthetics that involve building bodies. So there's a sequence in which a man is frozen, is suspended and frozen, and then he cracks and he falls to the ground as the gravity is put back on. And he did a great job. He did the scene in which Jason Isaacs' character is skinned alive. He did that body cast. So he did all of the body molds, and Pauline did more of the specific makeup effects. So the maggots on the little boy's legs, that was more of her stuff. It was interesting to have two such brilliant people working together. The reason we did it was because just the amount of work. We thought that one person just couldn't handle it in one department. So that's why we mixed it up. I mean, poor Bob, there is a story, which is true, but when the man cracks and falls to the ground, someone had actually, presumably the guy who made it, had put a plastic doll, into this body. And if you look closely, now poor Bob, I don't know who did this to him, some embittered employee, but that was weird.
The thing about special effects is, when you're doing a love scene with someone who's got really bad breath and you don't like them, that's a special effect. You're pretending. When you're meant to burn your lips on a cup of coffee, but actually they're serving you cold Coca-Cola. It's a special effect. So the fact that you're meant to pretend that a planet's about to hit you in the face, or you're levitating, or whatever, you see visions of your ancestors grinding each other into meat, or whatever the things are that happen in those flash frames, it really, it's all the same. There's no difference between normal acting in a normal room and when something's blue screen or when they put it on later, because none of it's really happening. So I think more is made of special effects from an actor's point of view than is necessary. The only thing that's really hard is if there isn't another character there when you're meant to be talking to someone, which does occasionally happen, but I don't think it happened in this film.
The reason I got involved in Event Horizon, we'd done as a company, we'd worked on quite a few films, and we heard about this film that was coming out. It sounded fantastic, youngsters, it was all sci-fi with a nice cast. We went up, met Paul Anderson, the director. Luckily we got on well with him, and that was it. It was fantastic, it was really good. He was terrific, lots of ideas, we put in our ideas. Couldn't ask for anything else.
I became involved in Event Horizon when I was contacted by Paul Anderson, and he had a script at that point, but not a lot else. And it was very loose, the script at that point. And we had a meeting, we got together and had a meeting, and it was a kind of, I think he'd seen Hellraiser and spoken to Clive about a couple of things, and he was enthusiastic for us to get involved in some of the more deaths and some of the more complicated gigs on it. So we got on very well, hit it off well, and then we started the script. There was as I remember, there was quite a gap then, and then the script suddenly came back, and everything was suddenly going. So it was a sort of, from a long time talking about it, we were then suddenly involved in shooting, and it was all systems go.
We had a brief from Paul Anderson. Our main one was to construct something, or give the image of Sam Neill when he becomes, it's hard to describe because everyone calls it the Werebeast, but I'm not sure that was ever the right name. I know everyone calls it that, but it was more the dark side of Sam, really. He had to have carved things into his face that we don't understand, into his whole body, and I think that was just the bad bit of Sam coming out. He was taken over, who knows, he's the devil. No one's ever understood, but we had to give a visual.
Prosthetics are really what you stick onto an actor, so it's a thin appliance. You take the life cast of the actor's face, and then you'd sculpt on top of that an appliance that would be stuck on top. That's called a prosthetic. It really comes from a war term from World War II, or World War I in fact, which was where they had to make fake noses and things like that when people got blown away. So that became a prosthetic, and it's grown out of that.
Well, when we start designing a full body prosthetic and designing a character like the Werebeast, for a start we have to take on board Paul, or the director Paul Anderson's ideas, and Sam Neill, the actor, who of course is such an important guy. He knows what he wants as well. You get a combination of what they feel the character should look like, and then you design. You do a series of maquettes, a series of images. I mean, Paul very strongly knew that Sam had to incise these sigils and marks and runes over his face, carve them into his flesh. Great idea. And he didn't want to see seams, and he didn't want to see edges. This had to be believable, close up, really tight as flesh on this guy's face with just these marks. So we start off and we sculpt a whole load of different maquettes. Prefer not to do drawings. Drawings 2D, you can do a quick sketch, but until you can see something in a three-dimensional form, then everyone can walk around and go, oh yeah, that's cool, that looks nice at this angle. So we do a load of maquettes first, and then we start into the major process of life casting and sculpting.
The scene in which he's in the chamber and his veins are literally popping out of his arm, that was horrific to shoot. That was really complicated to make that realistic, and we shot a lot of it in camera with makeup, and then we CG enhanced it, which is why I think it's quite an effective sequence.
Oh my God. Animatronics are completely different to prosthetics. What they are is when you don't have an actor involved and you have a mechanical puppet or a mechanical device inside something that's usually inanimate, which then has to be controlled from the outside, either by radio control or cables or pneumatics or things like that. We had quite a few animatronics in Event Horizon. We had the Burning Man, so underneath all that he was a bit like a rod puppet which all burnt, and we also had a really cool animatronic for where the one of the leads falls and slams down, which had a little kicking motion and everything else in it. So animatronics are when you don't have people inside, prosthetics are when you've got actors inside them.
So, we're doing a full body, when we're dealing with head to foot prosthetics, first of all it's a full body life cast in separate sections. So we do the head first, because the head is going to have to be worked on many times in the future, you know, for the close-up facial prosthetics. Then, depending on the body position, standing you do the body in, you might do separate arms, you might do the torso separately from the waist down to the legs, and all these components. It can take up to 6-7 hours for body cast sections, which is crippling for the actor and for the people who are working on it. So you get plaster positives out. So you've got Sam Neill in pure white plaster. And then you start, it's lots of moulds, lots of different sections that we can cast, we can work on, sculpt, remould. Oh, process is endless.
There was a lot of scenes that from the film that required prosthetics. There were, for us, one of the major ones was a big nightmare sequence, which is the videotapes that reflected back to the people who were the original crew, and there was a lot of prosthetics in that. Sometimes it was you got blood and guts gore with insides torn out and eyeballs missing and severed limbs and all that kind of stuff. There was also some complicated prosthetics on the character that gets frozen when it tries to commit suicide by opening the outer hatch, and he actually ends up tumbling outside and freezing up. There was a lot of complicated prosthetics on that, which had to. Some of them were on the wrists, which had to bubble up, but also we had complicated prosthetics on the face that were all had to crack and revealed the cracks underneath. Quite a lot of different. I'm trying to think what else there was on it. The prosthetics. Lots of blood and guts. I mean, there was just lots of your normal guts and gag like that, and tons of blood. I mean, there was so much blood. But I think probably for a 30-second sequence, that was the sort of montage of stuff that takes place in the video that they watch. There was a week's shooting and probably about 4 or 5 weeks worth of prep, just all the different gags and everything else.